Welcome back, everybody, to this episode of the Open Concept Podcast, where we are breaking down those unnecessary walls and barriers that stand in the way of greatness. Our guest today, my man, JP Forno. How you doing, brother?
Doing great, man. Thanks so much for having me on. I know it's been a long time planning.
Awesome. For those of you that don't know JP, he's the founder of Meteor and helps people with one of the biggest problems that they have in their business, which is clawing back their time, reclaiming their time with the unnecessary items and unnecessary tasks that they would otherwise find themselves doing. That ends up costing a lot of money. Some fun stats. Just brought back, I think it was, you were mentioning about $3 million in savings is sort of what you had budgeted by hiring out and implementing assistants and teaching people how to work with assistants, finding great people from around the world and integrating them into businesses to really take a lot of time off of the founder's plates, which translates pretty quickly into a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's just the labor cost savings, right, of hiring someone as an international employee, let alone like all the hours that are saved and all the money that people can generate from those hours that are saved. That I haven't really calculated that, but it's significantly more money. But it's we're in a mission of buying back our time as we continue to scale, and we've seen a lot of that in our business.
So I hired on my first assistant. This is going back probably 2.5 years ago now. And the idea of working with somebody, right? There was this barrier that I had in my mind of it was going to be impossible for somebody else to jump in and understand what I do as well as I do. And so when I was looking at hiring an assistant, it was a very difficult thing for me to wrap my head around initially. Now that I have one and I have somebody that's in my corner that can tackle the tasks that I need them to do, I have a very difficult time imagining my life without one. But there was a big barrier there for me, and I can imagine when you talk to a lot of people, there's a lot of common themes that come up and a lot of fears that people have or misconceptions that people have about bringing on an assistant into their organization, whether it's going to be how do we securely pass information, or how do I delegate information properly to get somebody to perform at a level that I need them to. And also, like, how do I know that they're operating well? How do I know that they're doing a good job, rather than just like putting your finger on the pulse and checking and making sure that, the odd thing is done here or there? Like, how do you actually do that? So can you break down for us maybe some of the common misconceptions that people have, or the common barriers that they may have when it comes to hiring their first assistant?
Yeah, I think that the main challenge or misconception is a misalignment of expectations. Typically, how founders find out about this magical role of an executive assistant is by hearing the success that this strategy has had by one of their entrepreneur friends, or maybe a mentor that they look up to, or maybe a coach that they've hired. They've all used assistants, and they're at a place where their assistants take all this time and pour back into them. They take care of all these amazing things in the business. And so when somebody hears that, they have an expectation that as soon as they hire an assistant, they'll be able to get those benefits. What they don't see is all the infrastructure, the trial and error, the hours invested in training and delegating that got those entrepreneurs to be where they're at with their assistants. And so that lack of patience, if you will, of onboarding an executive assistant the right way and not getting those results immediately gets people to assume that the strategy doesn't work. They start saying like, oh, I hired someone, I tried to delegate stuff, it didn't work, they didn't show up, they weren't as good as I was. And I think is because people like to promote the executive assistant's results and how that benefited your company, but they don't give you a framework on how you should actually onboard one. And so I think that misalignment of expectations of how long does it take and what's the volume that's required with your assistant in order for him or her to work for you is a lot longer than what people assume. Um, and then I think that the other part that I think it's a little bit of a challenge or a misconception is that everybody thinks that they're good at hiring. Um, where
Yeah,
realistically,
I get that. I get that.
so I think it's a little bit of an ego check because as a business entrepreneur, you build a business, and for a lot of people that are at a point where they hire an assistant, they build a successful business, is bringing in income, it's profitable, and so you kind of feel like, oh, I've done all of these roles, so I know that I'm going to be able to recognize someone that can do the same. But the ability or the skill set of hiring someone and onboarding and training someone is completely different than whatever your industry or your trade is. And so people go into the hiring mode without really having a strategy or a roadmap that will get them the results that they're looking for. So part of what we're doing is we help people through that process and doing it in a methodic way that we know yields results. And then once they find an assistant, we help them through that journey of bringing them up to speed, of delegating, of not cognitively overloading people, sequencing the things that they should be learning. And so it's a very strategic initiative, but it is something that you have to be diligent about. It's not a quick fix or a 24-hour result type of initiative. It does take time, and that's the biggest misconception I see.
How much time should it take, like, for the onboarding process to bring somebody in? Because in it doesn't change from industry to industry. Because I imagine if you have a law firm, or if you have a contracting company, or if you have an electrical company, or if you are a medical doctor, there's going to be some form of specialized training that an assistant might take for one specific industry that might rapidly move them faster into understanding how the business works versus just a general assistant that is going to have to learn all the specific details of a business that they've never been involved in before. So what
Mhm.
does that look like? Like, is this a 30-day thing? Is this a 90-day thing? Is it a reality of like it's going to take 12 months before somebody starts to really understand your role? Or what sort of time investment is realistic when it comes to onboarding and training somebody for these types of roles?
I think that's an interesting question. I think that for me, it's kind of like a non-answer because it truly depends on a lot of things. It depends on the entrepreneur, on the complexity of the business, of the tasks that they're going to take. It also depends on the starting point that this assistant has when they walk in. An analogy that I would offer, for example, is like a baby. How long would you give your average baby to start walking, right? Like it's they'll walk until they get it, right? Some babies take shorter, some babies take longer, but they eventually will get there. Same with how they speak, right? Or how soon would they speak? There are benchmarks. Like if a baby hasn't spoken until like, and it's 7 years, like there's a problem, right? There's probably something you need to check. And so there are guardrails, there are estimates. But I would say that it really just depends on the person and the context and the situation. If you did a good job at bringing somebody through the door and you make sure that they have the technical competence, the cultural fit, and that this is a good career fit for them, if they have the good raw materials, then you work with them until they get it, right? Because you know that they have the right ingredients. We just have to change the environment around them, the iterations around them to get the result that we're looking for. Um, and it's also not something that it's not like a cake where at one point it's cooked, basically. And before then, you don't want to eat it because it's going to be too raw, and afterwards, it's going to be too burned. It is a continuum. So it's not like up till month 3, then you start getting the benefits. You start reaping some of the benefits before then. It's just at what level do you reap the benefits? So I will tell you, like for us, one of the frameworks that we have is that we have a 30, 60, 90-day plan, and we help businesses co-create that with their assistants. And so what we try to do is to get quick wins, or to help them delegate, not by order of importance, but by order of sequence. What's a task that they can do very easy that will give them the most amount of context in the business? Because the more context they have, the more effective they can be within the company. But they get a win, they get confident, and now they feel like they know the business a little bit more. Okay, what's the next thing that they can do? Then what's the next thing that they can do? And so my objective, at least with my team, is that in 3 months, you should have somebody that is already more than paying for the investment. But that's not to say that that's their limit. They definitely can do more. And sometimes it's just about having a little bit of patience. So if you're convinced that you hire the right assistant, and that they have the right ingredients, I would have a little bit of patience until they get it. Layla Hormozi, for example, in the Vantage School community, was writing a post about how long did it take for her assistants to get to the proficiency level that she wanted. She said 18 months. 18 months is what it took, because she runs an empire, multiple businesses, a portfolio company. I mean, you've been to their workshops, right? You know at what level do they operate. And she has like 4 assistants or something like that. And so she was saying like it took a while, but it was like the most worthwhile investment once they got to a point where I feel comfortable delegating. So it is a sequence. It's not binary, but that's kind of like how I would look at it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And it's good information because everybody that's, that might be listening to this is going to be at a different place in their business. And a lot of them either have assistants, or majority of them, I'm guessing, probably don't, because it's still one of those things that, especially in the trades and home service businesses, right? You get a lot of these, a lot of business owners, they hold so much information so close to their chest, and it's really difficult for them to delegate. What I try and encourage them to consider is that an assistant that you bring on is going to be one of the least, how do I phrase this, is going to be one of the lowest hanging fruits that you can, one, engage with, and two, as far as payment goes, right, they're going to be one of the least expensive hires if you're considering that against a project manager, an operations manager, a ticketed tradesperson. But it's going to be one of those roles that you can work through. They can help you build operating procedures. They can help build whatever that is in your business that you need, as long as you're taking the time out to work with them closely. And they should be able to replicate pretty well anything that you're able to do in the business. Where you get a lot of pushback is where people can't carve that time out themselves because they haven't worked out that discipline muscle to actually train anybody. And it's the same, usually the same results that you see as to why they, maybe hire a carpenter, or they hire, anybody else into their company, and they probably don't stick around, is because they haven't worked that muscle of getting that information out of their head and transferring that to somebody else. So they're probably not going to have that same kind of success with an assistant. But the difference is, an assistant, from my experience, especially the good ones, do a really great job of extracting that information from you. And they can document that and explain to you what it is that they need, and explain to you the best way to start to work with them. And that's what I think a lot of business owners need, and what a great assistant can do.
Yeah, a great assistant is a great observer. And to your point, it's kind of like a chicken and an egg situation, where I know that I need to carve out time to train my staff, but I need staff to help me gain that time back. You know what I mean? So it's like you're at this catch 22 where you should do it, but you don't have the time. But it's by carving out that time that you will be getting that bandwidth. And I think that the ways that you solve that is, to your point, having somebody who's incredibly proficient. It does help if you have somebody that has industry experience. It does help somebody that has experience with your type of founder or your scale of the business, because they can fill in the gaps a lot easier. I if you have patience, for example, you recognize I don't have that much time to pour into it. I just need to be a little bit more strategic with how I have this person consume.
Real quick before we get back to the show, if you have heard anything on this podcast that has resonated with you, or if it's helped you in any way, appreciate more than anything in the world if you could go hit that subscribe button or leave us a review. It helps us tremendously. I want to go back to being able to continue to serve and do more and more and help out and get bigger and bigger guests on, better and better. The only way that I can do that is with your help. I'm so honored to be here. Let's get back to the show. Appreciate you. Have a wonderful day.
This information. I'll give you an example. If you have a big team and the big team has already worked with you for 16 years, a good source of information for your assistant is your team, not only on how the business works, but how you work, how you like things, what are your standards, what are your preferences, your pet peeves, how do you actually win with Brandon, for example. The other thing is that people think that I have to carve out a 1-week training program because that's how you probably were onboarded in your first job or in your second job. You received a formal 2-week training education and then you were off to the field or whatever it was. I remember that was my case when I was doing door-to-door sales in college. We had this whole month of training and then we went to the field. So when I started a business, I'm like, crap, I don't have a month to train someone before they start their job. I have to run the business while I was doing it. So you don't have to do that. It comes with a realization that also doing that kind of training doesn't yield the best results. About 80% of what people learn in the first formal training weeks is forgotten because it's just too much information. So for a busy founder, what we recommend is leverage more shadowing sessions. Like the best way that humans have always learned is through apprenticeship, right? A one-on-one is just walk me through it and shadow me and I'll talk through while I'm doing the things that I'm doing and how I expect these things to be done. So you're still doing the thing, but you're bringing someone on board so that they can observe. But to your point, yes, they have to be able to observe. They have to be able to document. They have to be able to execute and have a little bit of that courage of I'm going to try this out, even though I don't feel like I have all the pieces of the puzzle yet. But that's how I think I'm going to learn. So yeah, it's a big challenge, but you only have to fix it once, almost. It feels like, right? Like once you fix it once you're able to carve out that time and you bring someone that helps you buy back your time, now you have all this bandwidth and then you could train it and you can multiply it. Yeah, it takes patience, but it takes you being smart with the time that you're already investing in doing things.
What would a trait of a great assistant be? And I want to preface this because I have had assistants that have been great and assistants that have not been great. And the assistants that have been great have been the ones that have been really proactive. And they are the ones that kind of latch on and they observe and they proactively do the things that I need them to do versus wait for the instructions to be given, right? They can read the play. And that for me is fundamentally a really big requirement. Is what you mentioned is the ability to observe, listen, but read the play. Like it's one of the core fundamental values when I'm hiring an assistant is having that ability to do that. What would you say are traits that people, if they are looking to hire an assistant, that you would say hands down, these are like green flag go, these are red flags, like hard stop, this probably isn't going to be the right fit for you?
So I have 4 traits that I would try to identify in candidates to identify if they would be a good assistant. Number 1, as you said, 100% is proactiveness or initiative. Being able to put energy behind initiatives, anticipate issues, try to see what other ways that they can provide value. That is perhaps one of the, and not just assistants. If you have a proactive employee, it's probably one of the most desirable traits for any boss. Like everybody who's been a boss of people can know the relief of having a proactive executor inside of your ranks. It's such a relief. Number 2 is critical thinking. I think that for me, it sounds like such a soft skill, like you think critically. For me, thinking critically is the ability of connecting the dots, right? Sure, you can be proactive, but if you don't think through why you're doing what you're doing, how things should get done, what are the high-level objectives that my executive is trying to approach, you're going to be proactive on the wrong things, right? So one of the things that critical thinking leads you to is having business acumen. An executive assistant, for example, has nothing to do with, like in your case, the construction industry. And so I could be proactive, but I don't know anything about how this business works. So I would just be doing a lot of work that's not going to yield results. But if I take time to think critically about, okay, how does this business work? Who do we serve? Who's our ideal customer profile? How do we differentiate than other players? What are the economics? How has this industry changed? What are the buyers expecting from us? Like their ability to think critically stems off from like the ability to asking good questions. So if they can connect the dots, think critically about a task, a situation, or an objective, and then they have the proactiveness behind it, that is a recipe for high level execution. A third thing that I would include on that would be coachability, right? So there is going to be a learning curve in anybody that you hire in any position within your company. Even though they're an expert, once you're coming into their company, it's like if they're stepping in a new country, right? And so if they don't have the ability to receive feedback and get coaching, whether it is from you, whether it's from a peer, whether it's from the market, if they don't readjust behaviors to optimize for better results, then sure, you're going to have somebody that thinks critically, tries things, but they won't be able to make the adjustments and get the results. Coachability is such a key thing, specifically for executive assistants, because there's such a thing as preferences and traits and tastes, for example, or like pet peeves, like little things that you really have to learn and be observant about. I don't know if you watch Suits a lot. I
I
used to
have,
watch.
yeah, I have watched it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for
Roughly.
example, Donna was Harvey's perfect executive assistant because she was very observant and she was very coachable. She understood how he likes the things he likes, the way he likes them, right? So, being able to receive coaching, receive feedbacks, and be relentless on it, that is such an admirable trait when we're looking at executive assistants. And the fourth thing, which is, I guess, something that's like everybody has this as a company core value, is integrity, right? I think that, and it's like, it's the Hallmark card equivalent of a company value because everybody's like, oh, we should have integrity. But it is true. I mean, like, if you have someone who's proactive and has critical thinking, but they're shady, that's a dangerous person, right? Like, that's a psychopath, for example. So, you're going to be trusting your executive assistant with things that you probably don't even trust, sometimes even your spouse. For example, medical history, your personal credit cards, your income statements. Like, there's a lot of things, if you're using an executive assistant the right way, they're going to have a window to look at your life that most people don't have. And you want to have somebody that you want to trust. It's sort of like a marriage, if you will, right? Depending on like the scope, right? But like, for example, my executive assistant, 70% of the tasks are business related, 30% of them are personal related. And so they get to know you at an intimate level. They have access to you at an intimate level. And if they don't operate with integrity, they can really hurt you. We've talked, like Dan has talked about this a lot, that he is trust. He trusts people to a fault almost. Like, I give access to my bank statements, to my credit cards, to all my stuff, and I do the same thing. But so that is why it's so important to make sure that you can trust someone blindly if they're going to have that level of access to you and your business.
So one of the things that, I mean, you mentioned integrity, and that's a really, you can pretty well identify if pretty quickly if somebody is coachable, if they're observant. But to figure out if they have integrity, that's a that's a much more difficult trait to figure out quickly. So that might often take months, right? Because when somebody shows up for the first 30 days or 60 days or the first week, like, they're going to start off and they're probably going to have or show that they have a huge amount of integrity. But that truly doesn't come to light until they're given these tasks. And as you start to work with them, you start opening up more and more information about, personal information, like you said, credit cards, maybe bank statements, medical history, social media, whatever that is, that you start handing over more and more. But how do you hire for integrity? How do you test for integrity, especially in the assistant world there? What are like basic quick tasks that you can have them do where you're not going to be exposing yourself to too much, where you can kind of dip the toe in before you start giving more and more information away? Because I'm sort of the same way, man. I, to a fault, I trust everybody until they prove that they can't be trusted. It's how I've always lived my life. It's certainly come back to bite me in the ass, but for the most part, like that is me to a core. I assume that everybody has the best of intentions and that they want to win and they're on the same page. But how do you interview somebody for that, especially if there's a cultural barrier? Because a lot of the assistants that you're working with are hiring from an international pool, right? Whether it's going to be
Yeah.
South America, or if people are hiring from the Philippines versus having somebody right there at your desk. Hiring for integrity can be a pretty difficult thing. So, what do you do with Meteor to make sure, and when you're bringing people in and you're vetting assistants, how do you test for integrity? And then how, as the business owner, would you, when you start working with somebody, test for
Yeah.
integrity?
It's a great question because there's not a single answer. The truth is it's a difficult thing to determine if someone has it or doesn't have it. One of the things that we like to say when we're recruiting is that our objective is not to find the perfect candidate. Our objective is to de-risk the hiring decision. And the same is with the qualities that you're looking for. It's not like you're going to find out for sure that somebody has integrity 100%. You are just de-risking the off chance that they don't, right? And so there's a few things that, for example, we've seen correlated to integrity. For example, work ethic is often related to integrity. And so, for example, if someone's willing to go through our process is long and it's very difficult because we do test. We test for a lot of things. We test for English. We test for psychometric. We do like 4 or 5 or 6 different test projects. We do role plays. We hold all candidates to a lot of scrutiny. And somebody that doesn't have integrity, who's a little bit shady, they don't typically want to go through that entire process. They want a quick win. They want to basically get a shortcut. And so if they're not willing to work hard for it, that could be seen as a proxy of they're not going to have integrity in other fields of their life, right? And so we typically find that we don't get shady people, assistants that would ghost their executive, or that would steal company information just because people who are willing to go through that amount of work to get an opportunity, that means that they believe in the work, and then they want to be part of this company. So that's one thing that I would say. The other thing that I would say is sometimes like background checks and things like that are always things that we do. We do criminal and police background checks. But we do reference checks a little bit different than in most processes. Most processes, the reference checks are the references that the candidate gave you. We do reference checks based on previous hiring managers. So the only way really that you can know if somebody has integrity is by repetition of interactions, and interactions where you have high stakes. And it's a gradual process. Now, you want to be able to shortcut that during the hiring process. You need to talk with somebody who has had repeated interactions with these people. And a hiring manager is a great example of that. So we tell candidates, I don't want to talk to the references you listed in your CV that are probably your cousin or somebody that's a good family friend. I want you to get me the contact information of your previous hiring manager, whether or not that ended up badly or not. I want to have a conversation of how this relationship was with them, and they can probably talk about those repetition of interactions with them. Um, so those are the types of things that we typically do to test for integrity. But again, it's not a exact science. I think that integrity is more tested during now when they start working, and it's a gradual process. I actually am the opposite of you. Instead of like everyone's innocent until proven guilty, I'm a little bit of the opposite. You're guilty until proven you're innocent. I approach this with a bit of a higher level of skepticism, just because I come from the call center industry.
Yeah.
There's a lot of shady shit that happen in that industry. There's credit cards being swiped. There's identity theft. There's a lot of things. So I'm a little bit of the opposite. So what you do is kind of like releasing the leash a little bit and trusting it, and you work up the levels. So I'll give an example. Like my executive assistant has access to banking information, to my with my personal credit card. We didn't start there. We started by the email. And after the email, it was knowing the salary of everybody that worked in the company and building that. And after that, it was my medical like if I have medical situations, and help me manage that. And then finally, we got to a point after 6 months where I'm like, okay, cool. We're at a point where I feel that I trust you with my credit card. Even when I give her my credit card, I approach this a little bit smart and have limits around how much she can spend, and what she can spend, and the alerts that I get. So I'm not reckless with trust, but it's a little bit more of a drip campaign. And so half of it is done through the talent acquisition, half of it is done during the job, but you'll never know 100% for sure. You're just trying to de-risk that decision making, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I love the way that you put it, right? Is your job is not to find that absolute, uh, with certainty, that perfect candidate, but your job is to de-risk the hiring process. And that's a great way to put it, because even when you are going to hire any sort of employee, whether it's going to be an assistant or whether it's going to be, a new apprentice or an office manager or anything there, you kind of go through that process, but there are these test projects that you need to do. Give you an example. I was hiring for a creative director role, and I had a number of candidates that came in and narrowed that down, but I knew that I wasn't going to be able to understand if they were going to be the right person until we did some work together. And that came with an investment, right? So one gentleman, he came in and I had said, okay, we're going to do this. I was a little hesitant about him, but I said, hey, I'm going to pay you. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a couple little sessions, and I'm going to pay you $250 for these sessions. That was sort of the first test. Is like, okay, I'm going to pay for your time to come out and do this because I want you to take it seriously. And another woman I had done the same thing with, but I said I extended it. I had a little more faith in what she was going to be doing. We did a test project, or a series of test projects. And I had said, I'm gonna prepay you. This is like where that trust to a fault thing comes in.
Sure.
I'm gonna prepay you $1,000. And this is where what I would like to see happen, because I feel that if you are paying people, then there is more incentive there. And she could have taken that, that $1,000 and just disappeared. But I got the intention that she didn't want to do that. She wasn't going to.
Yeah.
But it was still this getting your feet wet, and like you're paying a little bit, which I thought was important, because you're going to get these great results. And if people are getting paid, then they are going to be trying to prove these best results. And what I've found with assistants as well is it has taken that time, right? You get involved with them, but like in order for them to be really bought in, for you to be really bought in, they kind of have to be in your world for a certain amount of time, and that time does need to be compensated. But that's it. It really is a test as you go. And I love the way that you put it about it being a drip campaign versus just a full open yard sale of just go get it done, get it done.
Yeah, it's building a relationship, and we see this sort of behaviors in other different spaces. Like, you wouldn't marry someone that you didn't date first, and you probably, like, if you wanted to move in together before, like, depending on your religion, of course, right? Like, but you start testing things out until there's a level of certainty that's reached. Same thing. That's the reason why sports team have tryouts in high school, right? Why you have an NFL combine, why you have boot camp in the army. Like, there you want to recreate the environment that people are going to be facing, just to see if somebody could withstand that level of responsibility. Like going to the boot camp example, or SEAL training, right? Navy SEALs get exposed to perhaps the most stressful situations that you can imagine, and they are expected to perform in those highly stressful situations. So if Navy SEAL training was a breeze, that probably wouldn't give me the confidence that I have the right squad to go out and execute these missions, for example. That's why Hell Week is Hell Week, right? Like, that's why it has that brand um, of difficulty. And so what people don't realize about these test projects, however, is that it has a dual benefit as well. Like, for you, it allows you to see a display of skill set in action. It allows me to gauge, okay, this person, I think that they have a part in my team because I could see these behaviors that I see in high performers in my team. I recognize these patterns. Great. But you also have to think about it from their standpoint. Every time that you're bringing somebody to your team, you have to think about, this is a two-way street. It has to make sense for them as much as it has to make sense to you. Not what typically happens when somebody's applying to a role. The only thing that they get to see about this new role that is going to impact their life, it's like a fork in the road decision, is the job description, the website, and whatever the interviewer says. That's it. That's all the information that I have to base my decision that's going to change my life on. That is a disservice to the candidate. So when you do test projects, what it does is that it also introduces a candidate to what the world is going to look like once they step into this role. And they can filter themselves in and out of contention based on that. If they hated doing your test project, that is amazing. They can be like, you know what, this was great. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll shake your hand, but this is not something that I want to spend many years doing. And so it does help as a filter for them. Is this something that I want to do? And if it is, it also sort of served as a pre-onboarding, right? If you did a test project where, for example, a creative director, and you had them do a social media campaign, and you gave them your branding guidelines, you gave them your company history, you gave them access to your Instagram analytics so that they could get the context, and they built their project based on that. Guess what? If you did hire them, they have all this context that they already did that you would probably have to done from scratch if you hire them during the onboarding. You have to go through the analytics, through the branding guidelines, through your social media page. They did all that stuff during the skills assessment. And so it serves as a pre-onboarding. It shortens the learning curve and it lets them hit the ground running a lot faster. So test projects help you find good candidates, but it also helps them make a better decision about their careers, and thus making it a longer stint, or they're more reassured that this is something that they want to do long term.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. AI. Some people might ask, do I even need an assistant? Because I can whip up an agent through Claude, pretty quickly. And that becomes a question that I get all the time when I'm talking to people about assistants is, all right, so maybe they're dealing with their calendar, email, workflows, all of this stuff. There's going to be a point where a lot of assistants and a lot of the work that they've been trained to do is going to be able to be automated with AI. If somebody was to ask you that question, what would your response be? How do you frame the world of executive assistants paired with this new wild world of AI that we're moving into?
It's an interesting question because I think that my stance is that truly I don't know. I mean, like, I have some frameworks for how to think about this, but this is a technology that is unprecedented, right? We don't know if it's going to replace my job as a CEO, let alone my executive assistant, right? And so that's a stance that, I have to approach answering this question with a level of humility that we might not understand how this technology might shape out. It might be bigger than what we can currently comprehend that this technology is going to be. Here's what I've seen, and here's how I would think about this executive assistant versus AI, is that, yes, a lot of the things are and should be automated. I see executive assistants as an implementer of AI as opposed to like a barrier for AI to be implemented. I can tell you a handful of instances where Maria, my executive assistant, has leveraged AI to make her job easier for me. And based on that, I can assign her more stuff to take off my plate. And so I think that when you have a capable human that has judgment, taste, critical thinking, and context of the business working in concert with AI, that's the best results that you can get. So now a requirement is they have to be open-minded to artificial intelligence. They have to want to be eager to learn how to use it more. They have to be okay with it changing a week from today because this world is changing like by the minute. So yeah, it's a different set of skill sets that you're now vetting candidates on. But I think it's going to be a force multiplier for what an executive assistant can do. The other thing that I would say is that with AI, a lot of businesses have to be careful because just like the gold rush, yes, there was gold available and it made a lot of people rich. but it also introduced a lot of scammers. And I don't know if you've
Oh
heard of
man,
all the.
I'm glad you're going down this topic. I'll let you finish your thought, but yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I wanted to find out a analogous moment in history where something like this happened, and the gold rush was a good example. I mean, internet, industrial revolution, all that stuff was also, but I like the gold rush because I remember reading all the ways that people would scam other people, taking advantage of their interest in gold. They would sell them broken tools. They would sell these sacks of dirt and tell them like there's a 5% chance that you're gonna have gold there, and it was all like graphite or fool's golds or things like that. Like there, it gave just space. That hype that everybody was having just gave space to gullible buyers, and they just believed that this was like it's 100% certainty without doing the work and being strategic. They would sell plots of lands that were barren. Like it happened a lot of. There's a lot of things that happened during that time period that was very shady. And so when I look at people having agents to fix or automate processes and stuff like that, I really, when I see them in actuality, you can just poke so many holes through these workflows, and how it's like security concerns, or how it's like you're one update away of this not working, and then you have no succession plan for this not working because now you assume you delegated all this stuff to this technology that you really didn't know how to prepare. So Dan talks about it all the time. A lot of people are using AI. Not a lot of people are making money off of it. They're just using it because they feel like they have to use it. And so the other thing that happens is that now people are becoming more tool integrators. So I've seen businesses with a tool stack of 40 different tools, like 50 different tools, and it just becomes a clutter of like all these like micro tools that try to work together with each other. So I think that when we're talking about specifically the intersection between AI and assistance, you want to find somebody that's going to be an enabler of AI, that can be sort of like a toolsmith of AI, right? Somebody that can yield or wield these tools, sorry, in order for you to get outcomes. But I don't think that you should just do AI for the sake of AI. And I also think that you should be mindful or just, I guess, cautious of just automating for the sake of automating without just thinking through things. So again, I have those two perspectives, right? Like I believe in this tool is incredibly powerful. I am actively looking to ways on how to harness it, how to make things better. But I also really enjoy the human component of working with people that can like learn the business, understand where I'm coming from, have that repeated interaction. There's a lot more depth to a human being than the workflow of tasks that they're doing. And so if I can relieve their workload and teach them other things to do, I think that there's a lot of things that they can do. Intuition, for example, is one of the things that's so underrated. And the reason why I don't think has been able to replicate intuition is because AI learns from our cues, and we really probably don't know how to explain intuition very well, right? We just know that our body does internal calculations that we don't know how they came up with, but there's some merit to that. And so I think that the future is human and AI together working in concert.
Intuition is an interesting one, and I'm glad that you brought it up because intuition has been softened. I find in a lot of people, they trust their intuition less and less and less, and they outsource their intuition to whether it's going to be AI or influencers on social media, right? They may have this gut feeling that they should be doing something, but then they see somebody that has 100,000 followers on Instagram saying something else. They're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this because this person is telling me this, and their hook really caught me, and they made a good point over the last minute and a half. Or it's outsourcing their confidence to AI. And
Yeah.
if they're going through and they're seeking advice, they know in their heart they should be doing something different, something that's pulling them forward, something that's going to be that right move. But because AI doesn't have all of the context, and that's the idea. So you want to give it as much of your context as possible, and it will do a better and better job of learning who it is that you are, so it can provide great advice. Still, it doesn't have that intuition, and how you sharpen that intuition is going to be a difficult thing for a lot of people because I inherently believe that we're born with it, right? You have as a kid, like, when you see your mother's face, it's like, okay, this is calm. I'm sort of used to that. A stranger walks into the room that you don't know, you're like, okay, this kind of feels a little weird. Or
Mm,
if you're a teenager and you're growing, and like a teacher tells you something, you're a little like hesitant. Maybe you're thinking that doesn't sit quite right with me. Or you're in a nightclub when you're in your 20s or 30s, and a stranger enters and maybe has like a coat on and looks kind of suspicious, right? Like your intuition is like, all right, maybe I should get out of here. Maybe this is a bad dude. Like he's giving me like that type of intuition is just like it's sharpened into
mhm.
human beings. But the ability to think for yourself, and you mentioned critical thinking being a component there. We're outsourcing so much of our intuition and our critical thinking, just those muscles, to this technology where we can very quick. This episode is sponsored by New Vision Projects, and everybody has heard the horror stories that happen. They have a friend of a friend or a neighbor that's been renovating for years on end, or they've been building a home and it just hasn't gone the way that it needed to go. Budgets are blown through the roof, timelines, forget about them. New Vision Projects has an incredibly strong track record for over 15 years of working with customers, serving them at the highest level. If you are considering building or renovating, check them out on Instagram at New Vision Projects or at newvisionprojects.com. Building the homes you want with the confidence you need. New Vision has you covered. Let them show you why they're different. Back to the show. If we're not capable, fall victim to just that, and fall victim to no longer having intuition that we need, having the critical thinking abilities that we need to survive outside of sitting in front of our computer.
Yeah. I think innovation also happens at the edges. When I was fresh out of college, I really liked this methodology called design thinking. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of like this methodology or design thinking.
Break it down for me.
Okay, so design thinking is basically taking all of the principles that designers use to design products, services, experiences, and you use it to solve problems. It's basically like the scientific method, right? Where you start with empathy, then you ideate, then you do prototypes, and then you refine. Like it's just a loop of how do you build things and how do you solve problems through innovation, right? One of the examples that they were saying is there was this designer, there was this product designer. His wife had arthritis. And so what she had a problem cooking because when she was peeling potatoes, I don't know if you remember the old potato peelers that were all metal that kind of looked like a torture device. Those were
Yeah.
really rough on her hands. So what he did is that he developed a potato peeler with a little bit of a cushion. It was like a very comfortable grip so that his wife can peel potatoes and cook. Come to find out, the market really valued a more of a cushy handle than the traditional metal one. And so he did something that was outside of the bell curve of average. And come to find out that a lot more people appreciated that sort of experience. And so what I think is that AI models are based on massive amounts of data, so they will naturally gravitate to the mean or to the average. That's why every post now sounds the same. That's why everybody talks in the same sort of cadence that ChatGPT talks about. It's not this, but it's that. Staccato sentences, right? Like everything now starts sounding the same. So now the offers start sounding the same. The ad starts looking the same. And so it's because everything, like you said, is being outsourced to this average sort of like oracle, right? And so I do think that that's robbing ourselves of innovation and creativity because we're no longer looking at the edges of the bell curve in any given situation for us to innovate. And I think that looking at those things is how we start getting ahead of ourselves. Kind of like that Ford quote that if Henry Ford were to ask people what they wanted, they would have asked for a faster horse.
Yeah.
It's you have to step outside of those things. And so if we start through exercise becoming lazy about how we think about problems, killing our curiosity because we outsource the answer to somebody else, then that would basically kill our shot of like developing other cool stuff. I appreciated the fact that my math books had the answers at the back of the book. But once I found out that the answers were there, it kind of killed my motivation and curiosity to learn more about calculus, for example. It's the same thing, I think, in AI and this critical thinking. So I don't know what the answer is. It's having like methodical purges, or I guess, what do you call it? Like detox of AI, just having spaces where you can still exercise that, and think of yourself as an orchestra director of these tools, as opposed to like just somebody that's feeding information and getting answers. Um, you're wielding these tools. You're not letting them do the same. Like it's not the reverse. So I always thought this is interesting, and I feel like, man, I'm becoming way lazier now. Everything I could just ask ChatGPT, I can just ask Claude to do it. I'm no longer thinking about the words that I want to say in this post. I'm no longer thinking about the email that I want to send. I'm not even thinking about a love letter that I want to send someone, right? Like everything is getting outsourced. And so you can be a purist all you want, but I think it does have some utility to not over rely on AI to find those, I guess, innovation points at the edges of that bell curve.
It's so funny you mentioned that, outsourcing, and you talked about the way that people are talking, and especially on social media, right? You get a lot of these scripts that sound the same, and people talking sound the same, and the hooks sound the same, and the stories kind of sound the same. So I think everybody has used AI to go through that process, right? Or anybody that has a bit of a social media presence has been like, I need some ideas, share this with me.
Mm.
I need some hooks, share this with me. Every time I've done that, I've spent more time looking at the data and just going through figuring out, okay, how do I make this sound less like AI, and kind of like reverse engineering that, versus if I had just spent the time to not use AI to build it out in the first place, then it wouldn't sound like this. But you get these
Yeah.
these shots and these little hits of motivation or inspiration, but then you don't want it to sound like everybody else. So then you
Yeah.
spend time kind of reversing that. You're like, why did I even bother doing that in the first place? So I understand that there's a huge amount of merit for it. I agree, though, that you need to really understand where it's going to be useful and very much be a director of it. Otherwise, you can start getting yourself into trouble. And the other component is, I know we digress a little bit from the assistant thing. But we'll tie back in. But the with AI, I had this conversation with another. Another contractor. He's a renovation contractor down in the States, and he has been spending so much time building these AI tools that his workflows that he were breaking down for me were really impressive, but it was very complicated. He had 7 or 8 different tools that he was paying subscriptions for that had to be monitored. And if that loop broke, if something along the way broke, you had to go back through all of these tools and figure out how to fix it. Where like my conversation was, if you eliminated that and you had one person that was just involved in this outcome, you're probably going to save a boatload of time and money and headache, but it's not as
Risk.
cool. Yeah, it's not as cool. But like, how much money are you spending on these subscriptions? Maybe fractionally less than what you're paying for a person. But all of this, the loops that you're building, the workflows that you're building are great. But if something breaks, you're still the one that's going in and having to fix that and find where the bug is. And you're relying on all 7 or 8 of these different programs and tools to be working really, really well. But if one update happens over here, or an update happens over here, or a feature over here is all of a sudden removed, then your entire workflow that you've built is gone, right?
Mm.
It just doesn't work anymore.
You don't have any succession plan. Yeah, I remember I was part also of like a couple of the workshops at acquisition.com, and there was an example that Alex was saying around procurement. And he was talking about his team coming to him asking if they can invest in a software to fix this one problem in a workflow that they have in the business. And I don't know, let's assume that the software, it was almost like, oh, it's $100,000 to do that software. And he was like, okay, how many hours a month does it take the person currently doing this to do it? And the person was like, about 10 to 15 hours. Okay. So that is about 600 hours a year, right? How much are we paying this person? Okay. So that means that it would be 8 years until I get a return on that 100K. Or we could just have that person spend the 10 to 15 hours doing this. And it was like, okay, that makes sense. So you have to be like smart about where you're spending your money, because this is the other, to your point, it takes a lot of time to even build that, right? So your focus is so limited that you should be focusing on the main constraint of your business. But there are all these bells and whistles that just because you can automate something doesn't mean that you need to spend the time, energy, effort, and money doing it just for a not just an incremental benefit, right? So I think to your point is like picking and choosing what to do. And then the other thing you talked about is succession planning. Like I was just at a dental conference and then they're implementing all these AI tools, but dentists are pretty smart. None of them are firing people yet because they know that if this doesn't work and I just let go of my front desk staff in a dental practice, that is like I wouldn't be able to bill for 2 weeks. That's the profit for the quarter, for example, right? Like, so I think that yes, to your point, like I would much rather have the head of that department still be there working on that tool and being the escalation path or the succession plan if that doesn't work, and then have that person do something else. Like there's infinite scalability on business, right? But yeah, it's super dangerous. And so going back to the other point of like to what extent do we let AI hold the wheel? Kind of like with the example of writing, I would always do the first draft and then edit with AI, as opposed to the other way around where we having AI do the first draft and then we edit their work. That is, I think, a little bit backwards. So it's what role do we fulfill in working with this technology? And I would much rather have somebody there that is the subject matter expert of that area of the business, building these tools and automations if they are needed to begin with.
When you're bringing on an assistant, I imagine one of the qualifying questions is how proficient are you with AI? We've seen that across the board as one of the main things that employers are hiring for really in any role, right? It used to be how many words per minute can you type? How proficient are you with Microsoft Word and Excel? And this was the things
Yeah.
that you would bring on a CV or a resume to a company as a point of pride because it shows that you're competent in doing what you're doing. Now you don't need to type, right? You can very quickly talk in a whisper flow. Most tools have dictation. Most people end up sending messages on their phone where you can just talk to it and et cetera. But one of the top things that employers are looking for in hiring is how proficient their candidates are in using these different tools, AI tools specifically. When you're hiring and looking for assistance, where is that barrier right now versus where do you want to see as far as what is there a minimum standard that somebody at this point that is coming into a company to work as an assistant should have? So if you are hiring an assistant and they come into your team, is there a minimum requirement that you look for as far as their capabilities to prompt engineer Claude or GPT or build out workflows in Manus, whatever that is, or is it still very loose?
So it's not that it's loose, but it's not that we have like a standard either. The way that we think about it is that these technologies are going to be ever changing. So setting up a standard right now might be obsolete by 3 months from now if the technology, like before, um, where people were getting all the Mac drives and devices to be able to perform things that right now you can do in the cloud. It's like, okay, forget all the Apple stuff. We don't need it anymore. Like these things, these standards and practices have changed. We started doing the AI proficiency the same that we do with any other skill. We design test projects that there's no way that they can do them without AI. We explicitly ask them to do AI. I'll give you an example. We were hiring an executive assistant for a business entrepreneur who has many different businesses in the fitness space. He has a lot of franchises for gym from the United States to Dubai. Like he was a high profile individual and he wanted somebody that was AI proficient. So we asked for a use case, like what's something that you want to solve in the business? And he said, I want to figure out a way to fix my social media so that I could find out better topics and so that we can put more information out there. So we were like, okay, cool. The skills assessment was we asked all the candidates to use Manus to create an agent that would do research on ideas and topics and would have them sent at the beginning of each day. And it would have to have a logging page with users and all that stuff. And the reason why we selected Manus was because it had free tokens as opposed to like most of the other ones that run out very quickly. And we gave them very loose guidelines on the results. We gave them strict guidelines on the results, but loose guidelines on how to do it. And what we were testing for was problem solving, because it's really hard to test someone on something that has been around for a couple of months only, right? Like we're as entrepreneurs learning it, candidates are like even a little bit maybe behind of it. But what I want to test if they're going to be able to figure things out, if they're going to be able to problem solve. If I give them a prompt or a scenario, can they use AI to fix the problem? And if they don't natively know it, can they find out? Can they look up YouTube tutorials? Can they ask AI how to solve the AI scenario, right? And so we don't have a standard like you would an English standard where you test reading, speaking, listening, and writing. We would look at specific problems and seeing how they solve it with AI. So sure, some things you can test like prompt engineering and design, feedback cycles. How do you do organization of your projects, right? Like those are some things that we could natively see, but I would much rather test for the problem solving skill set or critical thinking and proactiveness than I would any particular standard with AI. Maybe I'm wrong with doing that, but for hiring executive assistants for as long as we did, if I find a problem solver, they will figure this stuff out. 100%.
No, I agree. Like the wholeheartedly, because the technology moves so quickly, right? The platforms become more and more relevant one day, less and less relevant the next day. So being super proficient in chat GPT, a year and a half ago or 2 years ago was maybe a really great boundary or a great guideline or a benchmark to sit at. But now pretty quickly people are using that less and less. So the ability to fundamentally troubleshoot and understand that the technology is out there and find the programs that are going to work well, build out the workflows that are going to start to make sense with the ever-changing technology at our fingertips is far more important than understanding how to use one specific program. Because I think like pretty quickly, like I look at our phones here too, right? We have at our fingertips 40-50 different apps on our phone pretty quickly. Like those are going to be started, we're going to eliminate all of those pretty quickly, and it's just going to be one button with one AI, and it's going to do whatever you want it to, right? It's going to be able to play music, it's going to be able to just send an email, it's going to be able to set up a podcast time frame. Like this is going to happen versus the many different apps that we have on our phone. It's all going to be just one agent or one platform, and that is going to disappear. So having the ability now to use those is, I don't know, it's one of those things where it's pretty tough to decide, because these programs, they are relevant right now, but they may not be in 24 months. Right?
Not to say that there's no utility in it, because, for example, a program developer is way more likely to pick up on these things than a layman who's never seen a line of code, right? Even though nobody's coding right now, and there's like this vibe coding epidemic, right? And everybody can develop an app. I would say that if I put a program developer and a layman human developing the same app for the same use case, the program developer will have an edge in that race. And so, yes, maybe learning these models right now will be helpful for whatever iterations in the future, but it won't be uber necessary. I was like, to your point, if everybody had a Jarvis that just basically does everything that you want just by a voice interface, which a lot of people are now building, I don't care about it in code, even though it would make me probably better at harnessing this tool. There might be some utility, but same as the Industrial Revolution, where it claimed that there will be no manual labor. Look around, there's still a lot of manual labor out there. It was just like we've just gained efficiencies elsewhere. So it's interesting. I think a lot about it, and I have these convictions that are very loosely held, right? And so I am open to changing my mind and pivoting about these things, because truthfully, nobody knows. But I do have this intuition that there's still a lot of human need left in business, and it just depends on where the value is placed now.
I agree, 100%. And plus, I love people, right?
Yeah,
I
cool
love
to
being
work
able
with
to
people.
I love being able to chat with people. That's why I love the podcast so much. It gives me an opportunity to sit down and actually have a conversation with a human being. And that's fun.
Mm,
And that's something that's, I think being lost in what we would consider just normal everyday interactions, whether it's, hanging out with friends at the beach or something like those types of things are going to become a luxury, and people are going to pay good money to just live a life that we once lived and we did before technology. And
yeah,
I think about it all the time. Like there's gonna be a big push for analog coming up here, and we're already seeing it, right? People are getting
yeah.
burnt out in their in their minds and their brains, and they want that human interaction. And human beings are fucking cool, man.
We're
I love
cool,
it.
man.
Cool.
Yeah, Gary Vaynerchuk talks a lot about it, that we're going back to the analog, kind of like
Yeah.
that story of the fisherman who meets a business owner that says, "Hey, you should do a fish empire."
Yeah.
To do
Yeah.
back where I was doing at the start. And so it's interesting that we're kind of going full circle on that. But yeah, analog is coming back. Everybody nostalgically thinks back in the 90s. I mean, I'm a 90s baby. And so like just hanging out with other people, I would find business really sad if it was just me with a bunch of AIs, negotiating with a bunch of AIs, and then just seeing my bank account go up. Some people are into that. That's not the reason I started this company in the first place anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, I love it. Yeah, when I used to go to Blockbuster on a Friday night, and it
yeah,
was that was the whole Friday night, right? It was like you go down, you walk into the store, you get popcorn, you rent a couple movies that you want to see, you go back home, you watch the movie, like but that whole thing, that was part of the experience. That was part of
yeah,
the and it wasn't just the finding the movie, watch the movie part of it. It was like, no, we're gonna like Friday, we're gonna go for a walk down to the store. We're gonna go to the gas station, the 7-Eleven next door. We're gonna get some candy. We're gonna get walk around. We're gonna search for videos. We're gonna spend some time in the store together. We're gonna go back and forth and like which video we want. And there was a race to like, can we reserve this new release? And like that thought of like,
yeah,
gosh, it's out. I can't actually get it because somebody got in here first. All of that was an experience.
yeah.
And pretty quickly, Netflix came along, and first, Redbox, and then Netflix, and technology changes, and now that's no longer an experience. Which is why I think drive-in movie theaters are gonna come back into
You
play.
know, I've never been to one. I would love to go. The only time that I ever saw what that was with the Flintstones.
Oh
You know, the
yeah,
intro where they like go into like a movie. I was like, I didn't know what those were. We don't have that where I'm from, but yeah,
yeah.
those kinds of experiences, man. I think they're. I mean, if you're starting a business right now, look into the analog space. I think that there's a huge market for it.
Love it, brother. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Where can people find you if they want to connect?
So if people want to connect, I guess the channel that's the one that I am more active in is Instagram. I'm at jp.forno, and I'm happy to talk with anybody. Happy to be a resource for anybody. But I talk a lot about like building teams to scale businesses. So if that's of interest to you, that's definitely the page to go.
Awesome, man. We'll make sure that we get that in the show notes. And everybody else that is there out there still with us, as always, appreciate you. And until next time, here rooting for you to win. Have a great day. Rock and roll. Peace. See ya.